dry puddles and dry ponds to come and hear someone as formidable and inspirational as Dr. Vandana Shiva. I'm particularly joyous that she's visiting us in the city of joy, and enormously honored on behalf of the Bengal Club and the Bengal Club Library Subcommittee that she's honoring us with her presence and her compassion and her erudition. Vandana Shiva is a prominent Indian-born environmentalist who has emerged as one of the world's most prominent critics of conventional agriculture and biotechnology. And it is a particular pleasure also because two members of our book club committee spread across the world, one Jane Ewart Carroll and the other Vivek Krishna, have joined us, and Jane, I think, has woken up rather early to be with us. Jane, what time is it there at the University of Florida?
It's 9 o'clock. I would be at work anyway.
Okay.
Our time changed, so it's not so early.
Okay, good. Then I feel kind of vindicated. So, Dr. Vandana Shiva has been referred to fearless, feisty, and a truth teller. But I'm also very intrigued that she's called the eco-warrior goddess by the E's in punk rock permaculture. A rock star, in inverted commas, in the global battle over genetically modified seeds by journalist Bill Moyers, and, I quote, a global sustainability expert by the University of Kentucky. Time magazine called her an environmental hero in 2003, and Forbes identified her as one of the 7 most powerful feminists on the globe today. Thank you. She has more than 50,000 followers on Twitter and about 80,000 on Facebook, I am told, and that, of course, keeps evolving, keeps changing. Dr. Shiva is perhaps best known for claiming that the introduction of genetically modified cotton seeds in India has led to mass genocide by poor farmers seduced by the false promise of GMOs. We're about to hear a lot more about that, I'm sure, by Dr. Shiva with your correct prodding. I like the quote she gave me a few days ago, which I will watermark. The battle will not be lost as long as the last person stays committed to grow and eat food without poison and GMOs. Vandana drank the deep, delicious draught of life straight from Mother Nature since she roamed the forests hugging the Himalayas. I know that a book club member of ours, Anju Munshi, has some questions about that, about her growing up, and I await to hear her answers as well. With the magic mantra of Mother Nature coursing through her veins, Shiva is at once a public intellectual, social philosopher, and physical environmentalist who has all the hardcore tools to implement best practices in the science of food production and tirelessly works to make the planet a kinder and more hospitable space where biodiversity and sustainable development can become practicable ways to a healthier, cleaner, and kinder legacy for generations to come. I must share with you how I first encountered this exceptional physicist, also a star in Canadian academia. She did her doctoral degree at the University of Western Ontario. As a PhD scholar at the University of Toronto, I strangely encountered her when one of my PhD committee members pointed me to the book, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge. We were studying the Nobel laureate William Golding's Lord of the Flies. The huge impact that her book had on me, as I concurrently read both the novel by Golding and Dr. Shiva's book, actually explicated clearly the views and philosophies of Rousseau and Bentham. And I think Dr. Shiva's scientific bent of mind and deep understanding of life, earth, punctuated all her activism, from the support of the Chipko movement to the Bija Vidyapith, the School of the Seed, founded by her in 2001, on to the Navadanya Biodiversity Center. And this at the Doon Valley echoes right across the world, where countries inspire to such learning centers in the first, inverted commas, world. Little wonder that governments of as far-flung places as Bhutan and leaders of countries such as Spain have sought Dr. Shiva's expertise to go off the green way and live in peace and harmony. So we have a symbiotic relationship with all species and all races of our times on this planet. Dr. Shiva is well known for claiming that the introduction of genetically modified cotton seeds in India had led to mass genocide by poor farmers, reduced and seduced by false promises. Dr. Shiva's ability to help ordinary farmers believe that they can make a change and transform their lives and the lives of their progeny makes her a kind of a mother figure courage to me, to many of us. Actually, a far stronger force, closer to our Indic form of the feminine as Shakti. Shiva seems the oracle who needs to be heard, not like Cassandra in the Greek tragedies, but more as a bodhisattva of our times who doesn't learn, educate herself, but also is ready to spread the word of erudition about Mother Nature. So, Vandana, we are extremely honored and so happy that you made the time for us all the way from Mexico back to Dehradun in the last week, and then we persisted and we prayed. And here is a good friend of Dr. Shiva's. She is Shukla Chattopadhyay. She has helped me with the help of the last president of the Bengal Club, the past president, Mr. Kunal Sen, to actually get in touch and to pursue Vandana till we made it impossible for her to say no. So with that, please.
So thank you, Julie, and thank you, Shukla, and thank you all who have gathered here. We're in a special building. We're in a special place. And in a way, it takes us to the period which has taught me to understand the contemporary period. This is where the British colonization started, and it began the contemporary era, actually. People don't realize that what's called economy today is really the colonial commerce of that time. Central to it is taking over people's land and resources. So as the Imperial Gazetteer said, the Indian government is not a mere tax collecting agency. its system of administration is based upon the view that the British power owns, in a certain sense, the entire soil of India. And then in 1793, so soon after the battles here, Lord Cornwallis, through the permanent settlement, one stroke of a pen, just dispossessed the peasantry. And then handed over the land that now belonged to England to the zamindars to be the tax collectors. And just two simple figures tell us what it did. Utsa Patnaik has done the calculation on the transfer of wealth in those 200 years, $45 trillion transferred. She's even done a whole book on this. And then what was being extracted? What was being extracted was not just the food the peasants grew, but it was 50% in cash. We weren't dealing with cash before that. It normally used to be tibhaga, 1/3 would be taken. And then the growers of food. And if you read the records, in those years of famine, more food was being exported. 60 million people died. 60 million. Including all the way till 1942, which is not that long ago. So when we'd become free, we'd become independent, and suddenly in the 90s, new negotiations started. I was invited to a meeting in 1987. I'd done a study on Punjab. Why did Punjab get angry? Punjab, the richest part of India. Why were the farmers angry? I'd studied there, done my MSc Honours in particle physics at the Punjab University. One could walk to university, everything was peaceful. By the early 80s, well, not 84, when I said I'm going to study, why is Punjab erupting in violence? At least 5 times I had to cancel my field trip. Either a bus had been blown up, train had been blown up. Half the time I couldn't go for field work. Eventually I did the study for the United Nations University called The Violence of the Green Revolution. And at that time I realized that the colonization of our post-independence period was through war chemicals. Because green revolution in very simple terms is taking a process that peasants have been engaged in for centuries and millennia, 10,000 years in India, 60,000 years in Australia. It's always in hundreds of thousands of years. And taking that process of working with the living soil, with biodiversity, and now suddenly saying you can't grow food without war chemicals. The entire science was changed, narrative was changed, and this is what people started to believe in. Except that the soil was killed. The water body, it uses 10 times more water. The water disappeared. As a peasant said to me, he says, we have cancer and the soil has cancer. A cancer train leaves Punjab because of the use of chemicals. And worst, even though in the early days it was made artificially viable by giving subsidies for the chemicals, then giving subsidies for the procurement, and then because it had all become high cost, subsidizing this costly food back again to affordable food. So we did a calculation, we've done a book, $1.3 trillion externalities, including the subsidies. Yeah? The costs we're bearing. And yet the farmers are now dying because the subsidies started to get withdrawn. Their resources started to shrink. Because meantime, a new food order and a new world order was being created, and that was what the WTO and the GATT was doing. So I was invited to a meeting where the old chemical companies were now saying our future profits will come from the seed. we have to genetically engineer the seed in order to take claims on patents and write an international treaty, which became the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement of the WTO, which is why I wrote the myths about patenting. And by the turn of the century, they said it, that by the year 2000, no farmer will have their own seed. All seed will be in our hands, will be 5 companies controlling food, seed, food, health. I said, that is so wrong. Not only is it wrong because you're trying to control life. You know, Kissinger has said food is a weapon. Control food, you control people. Now they're saying seed is the weapon, and we'll control life on Earth. So to understand all this, I named this phenomena, just like for the land, when it was declared the property of England, it used to be called Lagan. I called this Beej Lagan. That it is a Lagan taken for seed. Now, where did the seeds come from? Of course, from nature, and then evolved by farmers. You know, eastern part of India, particularly today's Chhattisgarh and Orissa, but I'm sure Bengal was also a part of it, is where the varieties of rice were evolved. We are what we call the Vavilov Center of rice. 200,000, one wild grass, Oryza sativa, turned through the brilliance of farming, particularly tribal farmers, into 200,000 varieties of rice. And it was Dr. Risharia, who used to be the head of the Katak Rice Research Institute, and he refused to give the seeds at the time of globalization, and he said, this is India's national heritage. I will not give these seeds. So World Bank had him removed, and then they had him removed from Madhya Pradesh. And when I realized I had to save seeds, I asked him to come and teach me. He stayed with us 10 days and explained to me. Yeah? And from him I learned that the first breeders are the farmers. And frankly, the toxic companies who give themselves patent rights and breeders' rights are not doing breeding. They're engaged in 2 processes, both of which actually shouldn't be allowed. The first process is stealing, which in the case of biodiversity, I just call biopiracy. Yeah? Because even in the time where the colonization was happening, the people in front were all pirates. And the pirates were fighting each other. When some were driving from Calcutta to Balasore, and there were 2 canals running together. And I said, why did they do 2 canals so close to each other? You know, for me, it's always resource wastage. And they said, oh, one was a Dutch canal and the other was a British canal. And they're far enough for them to shoot at each other. You know, that they wouldn't kill each other. There's just the enough distance. So they were all pirates at that time. And in fact, it's the 300 merchant adventurers who joined together and wrote the Charter of the East India Company and got it signed by the Queen. You know? And if actually you read, and something I think we should get students to do, is because I go to these systems and say, how did they think so strangely? And then I realize, why were the same patterns of mechanical thought being replicated in economics, in the way we think of politics, in the way we think of property, in the way we think of knowledge? You know? You add it together, they were all chatting with each other. Like you in the Bengal Club, hang together and chat. They were one little club. They were one little colonizers' club. It's mind-boggling. And a lot of people think they took over naturally, that we kind of got seduced by that thinking. No, it is very violent. A gentleman just gifted me his book on homeopathy. Homeopathy, they've tried to make illegal most of the world. I went for the 100 years of the founding of the first Ayurvedic school called the Kutakal Vetshala. And they have a whole college and pharmacy aside. Long time ago, they called me. Ayurveda had been made illegal. Till they created institutions just like, because earlier you became an apprentice with a Ved. and learned. So they had to create a college, they had to create a pharmacy, they had to do the same things. Save seed saving, which is, to not save seed is sinful in our culture. I remember a very big story from our region in Garhwal. There was a time when the Nepalese ruled us, the Gurkhas ruled us, and there was wars. And during those wars, they found that people died of hunger. But in the huts, there were we call it the tomris, the squash, in which the seeds were kept. The tomris were full of seeds, because you never destroy the seed. The seed is for the future. People died of hunger, but the seed was protected. And when I started seed collection, no one would ever say no, because saving and sharing seed is your duty to life, to creation. So at that time onwards, one hand I started to try and understand, even though I've never studied biology. I did math, I did physics. I didn't like the cockroach dissection, yeah? And then my sister became a medical doctor, and I used to look at her books. I said, so disgusting, just blood everywhere. And she used to look at my books and say, just equations everywhere. And we kind of turned our back to each other's learning. But seed is the most beautiful expression of creation. It's autopoietic. It makes itself. One tiny seed you plant. In the case of mustard, it gives you 1,000 seeds. In the case of millets, which were called primitive grains and driven out of cultivation by the Green Revolution, the word millets is a common name to all the little grains, and the name comes from the Latin word million. For them, million is 100,000, not our million, which is 10 to the power 6. So millets are those where you plant one millet seed and you get 100,000 seeds. That's the level of abundance. Seed renews. Bija, that which renews on its own forever and ever and ever. Doesn't need external help, doesn't need external inputs. So now the beej has been made an anti-beej, not allowed to renew. Not allowed to renew because biologically you're making it non-renewable, and not allowed to renew because legally you're making it a crime. I said, this is so wrong. I'm going to save seeds. I didn't know how to do it, but I learned. You learn anything you know is important to learn. We learn how to live, don't we? Yeah. Life is the best teacher. But I also said I'm going to follow the international forum, the whole globalization, which I did, and therefore we created the International Forum on Globalization, and we shut down the World Trade Organization in Seattle. Just a handful of, we were 10 people. We said, this organization, because they were talking about WTO as the new constitution of the world. And what was WTO? 3 treaties. 1 treaty owning seed. And the Monsantos and others had said then that including the US ambassador when I used to go to talk to him, on these issues in Geneva, saying, by the time we are through, seed has to be redefined as a machine and a manufacturer that we invent. And I said, you don't invent the seed. You manipulate the seed. But manipulation is not invention. Invention is creating something new. You have not created something new. You've added one toxic gene. In fact, if you honestly look at it, that's pollution, not invention. And it has to be assessed. That's why we evolved the discipline of biosafety. That's how I ended up spending so much of my time on the GMO question, because the GMOs were the entry to the new colonization. But now the colonization, just like at that time, land was defined as the property of England. Now, life, biodiversity, living organisms themselves were being redefined now as the property of corporations. Actually, even then it was a corporation. East India Company was created to conquer. They ruled us till the 1857 revolt, when the crown had to come over. So from the Bhu Lagan and the soil Lagan, the beach Lagan, And what does it mean? You mentioned many times, you use the word claim, that I claim. So let me explain that it's not a claim, it's actually the reality of what happened. Suicide started in India, and I did a pilgrimage, and I never just assume something, I go seek, I look, I understand. So I did a pilgrimage through what I call the suicide belt. And it's from Vidarbha through Karnataka, through Andhra to Karnataka. That time there was no Telangana. And of course in Punjab, in the southwest part of Punjab. And in this beach yatra, I wanted to find out why are farmers committing suicide. And in that pilgrimage, I realized that farmers are committing suicide because they've become dependent on a monopoly of BT cotton. Their own seed supply had been crushed because, very cleverly, something called seed replacement had been introduced. And it's like, kabadi walas come to our house and say, apni purani sari de do, bartan le lo, right? So they said, give your old seeds and take these miracle seeds. And the vans used to go, I feel so bad, I wish I had documented those vans and the videos. It was all about farmers becoming crorpatis and supermen and, and they just emptied out. And, farmers think, they're taking it from me, but my neighbor will have it. They're taking it from me, but my aunt will have it. So people assumed the abundance of seed. But they don't realize they do it as a blitzkrieg. At a go, they wipe it out in a whole region. There's no one else to turn to. Second was, we have the biggest public sector research in cotton, called the Cotton Research Institute. So I put an RTI. I said, how many seeds did you release in this period? Not one. The oldest cotton breeding institute just stopped releasing because the pressure of these companies. But the third was the best. All the Indian companies, because we've had for cotton, Indian companies, all the Indian companies were selling Bolgard, which is the Monsanto BT cotton. I was trying to tell them at that time, and they did not, they thought they were making money too. Till they got stuck when Monsanto wanted more money. And these people said, already the farmers are dying. We cannot take more. And then they came running to me. I said, show me the contract you've signed. Monsanto had lied to them and said they have a patent in India. I had fought to make sure there's no patenting of life. We've put a clause, Article 3J. Plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions. Therefore, they cannot be patented. Seeds cannot be patented in India because we don't create them. But they lied and showed a US patent. And the seed industry didn't know that a US patent is not an Indian patent because each country has its own patent system. So they started to pay royalties. Then they wanted to double the royalties because they added one more gene. And on that I always remember Einstein, who said, a clear sign of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Now, putting a BT gene had not solved the pest problem, it had created a super pest problem. Because every plant has a system of resilience and a system of pest repellents. Pesticides create pressures and create resistant insects. Pesticides kill friendly insects that control the pests. And through the monocultures, they actually become a place for breeding more pests. BT genes in the crop did the same thing because now every cell of the plant is releasing a toxic gene in the pollen. And there's not a single butterfly or bee on BT cotton plants. We've done studies, not one. The honey industry is dead wherever there's BT cotton. In the root system, the leaves in the bowl, releasing this poison. Now, in all of nature's intelligence, and systems evolve resistance. Even the overdose of antibiotics has created antibiotic resistance. Even the microbes learn how to evolve resistance Insects learn how to evolve resistance. Plants learn how to. So in America, half the farmlands are overtaken by superweeds. And in India, the bollworm, which was supposed to be controlled by the BT, has become a superpest, can't be controlled. 2017, I'd rushed down because 137 farmers had died of pesticide poisoning by spraying so much pesticide because they were not able to control the bollworm. The best is, having lied to the seed industry and taking excessive royalties, in spite of there being no patent allowed in India, Monsanto had increased the price of seed from 5 rupees a kilogram to 4,000 rupees a kilogram. Now just divide 4,000 by 5, multiply by 100, 80,000%. No, but it wasn't doing well. It was failing for 2 reasons. One, typical rain-fed area, all our varieties were drought resistant. You know, in black cotton, you don't irrigate. You work with the moisture in the soil. So rain-fed varieties. But now they were doing it with hybrids so that the farmers couldn't save the seed. And hybrid needs irrigation. So when there was no rain or there was no irrigation, it was failing. But the bollworm itself was outsmarting the technology. So for 2 reasons, it was failing. In some seasons, the farmers took once, took twice, took 3 times. Did they have that kind of money? No. There's a chain of agents. I've even seen in villages in Bengal, but in villages in Maharashtra, everywhere. The agents are paid a higher commission. You know, the price is higher from 5 rupees to 4,000 rupees. Obviously, the commission will be higher. These agents then are the ones who push these seeds on credit. And normally, they just get you to put a thumb print. In 3 years' time, you've been so deep debt, they come and say, you haven't paid your debt, your land is mine. Farmer will say, but I never mortgaged my land. He says, you put your thumb print, didn't you? They fill the rest above it. So behind the suicides are a big land grab. And I have been enough times in Vidarbha to be in homes when a suicide have happened. Normally the men, because they're the ones who go to the market and get trapped in this, and the women don't even know they're in debt. I was in a village when they came running and saying, a farmer has committed suicide, will you go to the widow? I said, I'll go to the widow. Widow had no idea. I asked her, do you know what the debt could be? She pulled out a box from above. Bolgat packet on Bolgat packet on Bolgat. This company, that company. But they're all Indian companies selling the same BT cotton of Monsanto. Failing again and again and again. And usually they go to the field. They borrowed one last time for a bottle of pesticide and poison and drink poison in their field. So when I say this is a genocide, I mean it in the literal terms of how the United Nations defines genocide, to deliberately harm a group. You know? Physically harm, partially harm, but a group. Now a group of farmers being trapped into this kind of debt on false claims. 400,000 suicides is not a small number. It's actually higher, but these days our government just decides if this is a troublesome data, stop taking it. So suicide data is not being made public. I have a very good colleague who does these studies. Every year he used to go religiously to the National Bureau of Crime Records where you get the data. Last time he went, he said, ma'am, they wanted to beat me up. They said, we'll arrest you. No one can ask for this data. Suicide data cannot be in the hand. Hunger data, not allowed. Crimes against women data, not allowed. You know? So we kind of live in this strange phenomena. I always used to say the whole GMO story is such a schizophrenic story because when it comes to the same seed, When you want to own it, you say, I've made something totally new. It's a new machine I made. And then you say, and what does it do? What are the new changes you've made? What does it do to the organism, to the other organisms, to biodiversity, to our public health? This is why I helped the United Nations evolve a biosafety framework. I was part of writing those laws. They said, no, 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 no. It's just like nature. Nothing new. I said, how can it be that the same thing is novel when it comes to owning, and the same thing is natural when it comes to disowning responsibility? So right now, when I was helping the Mexicans who are fighting the forced imposition of GMO corn on Mexico, and I'd written then for them that this policy of saying, don't look, don't see, don't find, is not a safety policy. It's a policy of ignorance. And denial. You know, when you don't even know what's happening, and you just say, we found nothing. But you didn't look for anything. How will you find it? But we are in that kind of situation. You know, we are what? The most prosperous nation of the world? We're going to be the biggest economy? Now, how on earth can you, through truth, allow people to have a doubt about this rising power that our beautiful land is? It has the potential to be a rising power, but in the values that are the values of this land. And I want to just cite two people. The reason I talk about earth democracy is because we've grown up in that context. The forests, the rivers, you know, they're our mothers. They are our relations. And the word, I've always used the word Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam to describe what it means, the family of the earth, the family of Vasundhara. And the only place where it's ever mentioned is the Mahopanishad, where it says, saying this is mine and this is yours, or this is my friend and this is my enemy, is a petty mind. The evolved mind sees the whole world as a family. And this is not just about our relationships with nature, it's also about our relationships in the human community. And that's why we have been a society of diversity and pluralism. You know, one of the, even on Tagore and the national anthem, what rumors were spread that he so actually wrote it for the king. And they never sing the later paras. And I think it's the fourth para, the fifth, which says people came from around the world and made this their home. And together for centuries we have been weaving garlands of love. Yeah? And yeah, in between there's a little upheaval, but we settle back into relationships of garlands of love. And Tagore, you know, his essay on Tapovan inspired me a lot when I was involved in CHIPCO. And I used to write a lot about it. But I continue to write also because his idea of learning from nature is the principles on which he established. We read his essays on the Forest University or University of the East. He's talking about nature as teacher. And let me just share with you. He says, contemporary Western civilization is built of brick and wood. It is rooted in the city, but Indian civilization has been distinctive in locating its source of regeneration, material and intellectual, in the forest, not the city. India's best ideas have come where man is in communion with the trees and rivers and lakes, away from the crowds. The peace of the forest has helped the intellectual evolution of man. The culture of the forest has fueled the culture of Indian society. The culture that has risen from the forest has been influenced by the diverse processes of renewal of life, which are always at play in the forest, varying from species to species, from season to season, in sight and sound and smell. The unifying principle of life and diversity, of democratic pluralism, thus became the principle of Indian civilization. This is earth democracy. Democracy as practiced by life in a rich diversity and as learnt by societies, knowing we are part of nature. We are not masters, because, you know, the people who occupied these buildings We're working very hard to say, not only are we masters of these brown people living here, but we are masters of nature. We are separate from nature. Well, of course, the civilizing mission. And the civilizing mission still carries on in the strangest ways. And now it's reaching our food, of course our minds. Our mind, Macaulay was about colonizing the mind. He said they're too well-to-do in this country. We can't conquer them. But we can colonize their mind. That's why the whole education issue, we have to make them feel everything they have is inferior and everything we bring is superior, including the junk we bring. And that's the economy of the world. What's the economy of the world today? Destroy the textiles of India, just like it was destroyed then, and fill the place with junk clothing. Junk clothing, both because of the ecological chain through which it's been made. Junk because aesthetically, frankly, it doesn't have those qualities. And also junk because it is junked. The fashion industry is now talking about getting young people to imagine that clothes should be worn only once. That's how fast fashion will grow its markets. And then they're throwing so much. There's mountains in the desert of Chile, in parts of, all over the place. They're just dumping good clothing. But of course, junk food. Now, the other person who has been a big influence for me, a scientist, a physicist from here, is J.C. Bose. And I don't think we're teaching enough to our children. Definitely not the children in science, they don't learn J.C. Bose. I would print all his volumes. I would make readers with Tagore and Bose for Earth Democracy, How We Buy. And this is what he said: the pretension of man and animals for undisputed superiority over their hitherto vegetative brethren does not bear the test of close inspection. He was working with these experiments. As these experiments bring the plant much nearer than we thought, we find that it's not merely a mass of vegetative growth, but its very fiber is instinct with possibility. We are able to record the throbbings of its pulsating life and find these wax and wane according to the life conditions of the plant, and seize in the death of the organism. In these and many other ways, the life reactions in plant and man are alike. And I've just done a book. It's only sadly available in Italian, but I did a book on the words through which the economy was colonized and how the meanings were changed. Every word became the opposite meaning, including the word vegetative. The word vegetative means full of vibrant life. But today we want to say someone's ill in hospital, become a vegetable. We're using vegetable as a metaphor, as a dead. So I have called this process of going from Mother Earth, Terra Madre, to, on the one hand, Terra Nullius, which was the legal language created, empty land, that we weren't people, therefore it was empty. The Aboriginal people weren't people. They were just part of the fauna and flora. But also morto nulli, terra, that the land is dead. That is the epistemology that was built by the Bacons, by the Descartes. I mean, Descartes needs good study also because all of Silicon Valley is inspired by him. They are trying to make Descartes the reality. Now, what did Descartes say? In my mind, I can decide you all don't exist. I'm talking to myself. You don't exist. In my mind, I can say my body doesn't exist. I'm just a mind. I'm a thinking thing without a body. And I can deny the whole world. And then from there, create this crazy situation of res extensa, just measurement makes reality, there's nothing like living system. Basically, and they call, he would torture animals, and when they scream, he'd say, they're beast machines. They're just the machines crying. There's no sentient being out there. And this thinking of Descartes is what is behind all this crazy thinking in Silicon Valley on transhumanism. That we've got to merge human beings into machines, and end humanity. And that's why there's exaggerated role of AI, and it's always just like for chemical fertilizers who said, oh, we'll grow bread from air. You take something, you exaggerate it, you treat it as inevitable, and by destroying alternatives, you create the inevitability. Whereas the reality on any knowledge system is you test it with alternatives, decide what's better, what causes less harm. You assess the harms. That's why we used to have technology assessment. It used to be a field. I spent 3 years in Bangalore on science and technology policy to understand these issues. Now you don't. You just have to bring them in. Because, pesticides are bad. Everyone's recognizing that. Spraying pesticides on your field, not good for you. Spraying pesticides from the drone, very good for you. If you do harm to yourself and your field, it's not good enough. You've got to do harm to 20 people around you. And you know what the name for this program is? Namo Drone Didi. Namo, of course, there's only one Namo, Drone Didi. No, drone is the thing, Drone Didi. Because now he's doing everything in the name of Didi. Lakpati Didi, Drone Didi. Everything that we would as ordinary people say no. Anything we would say no to, he's hiding behind women. And then there's this other very close friend, the millionaire who made billions by stealing software earlier, and now he's stealing biodiversity. Yes. Like, for example, in our seed banks, we have salt-tolerant, flood-tolerant, drought-tolerant seeds, He basically stole flood-tolerant seeds. And then he announced that my foundation has invented the subgene. Now, there's no one gene in any complex trait. One gene doesn't do the work. All of the genes have to work together. He says, so Gates Foundation announces this, and I was the ambassador to the expo in Milan, and I had to do a big keynote, and then there was a panel, and the Gates Foundation was there, the Gates person showing off. We've invented this flood-tolerant thing. So I said, can you just give me the parent? Just tell me the parent. We love your work, Dr. Shiva. We really admire what you do. I said, I'm not asking that. I'm asking you, what's the parent of the seeds that you're saying you've evolved? Because that's the stolen material. Now there are 1,500 patents on seeds of climate resilience. And I'm talking about 5 years ago when I updated this data. And all of this now is, when the farmer breeds, they do it carefully, they watch, they look. When plant breeders breed, they also work for years to do the selections, the crossing. Now what's happening with software and biotech is coming together. What they do is they know this farmer's seed is drought resistant, or this farmer's seed is flood resistant. And they collect it from the public banks. It's all available in public banks. Then you run it through a computer, and you get this kind of genome map. And as the British said, we came with a sword in one hand and a yardstick in the other. Yardsticks are the way to own. So now this digital mapping is becoming the way you declare ownership of life. And they talk about it's like playing a casino because you don't really know which part of the genome will do what. But they're doing guesswork. So we are hoping that our winning ticket will win. Or we can't turn living and life into playing casino. We've got to bring care and knowledge and sharing back to the picture. And what our work in Navdanya has shown, and I will leave, in case any of you have young people who would like to take advantage of this, I will leave some flyers of a summer school we are doing, including a trek to the most beautiful parts of the Himalaya. I'll leave this here. In Navdanya, we found 3 things. I began with 2 ethical issues. One, that seed cannot be defined as a machine. It's self-organized integrity of life. We can't take its life away and just say it's a machine. In the Supreme Court decision in America which says seed is a self-replicating machine invented by Monsanto. It's the case of Bauman versus Monsanto.
Invented by Monsanto?
Yeah. So basically this farmer used to take soya bean from an elevator where they store grain. He never bought from Monsanto. And from the elevator he'd plant. Monsanto would keep suing him. He lost lower court, upper court, went all the way to Supreme Court. And Supreme Court rules that even 20 years down the line, if soya bean is sold as grain, it is still a self-replicating machine. That every year, the seed replicating itself is Monsanto producing a machine. It's of course so wrong because our patent office at that time rejected a patent application of Monsanto and said this trait of climate resilience is already known. And one seed becoming a next generation is a biological process of the seed itself. You don't do anything. And it was rejected, but in the US it became replicating machine invented by Monsanto. So Article 3J and Article 39 of our Farmers' Rights Act are extremely important. And they're important not just because farmers' rights have to be protected, but we found, I started to do in terms of yield per acre, which only measures what leaves a farm for being traded. I said, we will look at health per acre and nutrition per acre. And our studies have shown that the more biodiversity you intensify, the more biodiversity you grow, the more nutrition per acre you grow. And using the same land as we use today for farming, if instead of chemical monocultures we used organic biodiverse systems, we could feed 2 times India's population. Not a child needs to be hungry. Every 4th Indian does not have to be hungry. But we are doing the wrong thing. We are producing commodities. We are not producing food. So, and this year we decided, because our seeds have been trashed, primitive seeds, low-yielding seeds. So this year we said we're going to take our rice. Last year we said rice. This year we're going to take pulses and wheat. We said we took 200 varieties in our collections and compared them both to what's being sold in the market as well as what's being distributed in ration, the modern Green Revolution varieties. You know the difference between native rices and the modern rices? Native rices have 146% more calcium, 135% more iron, 169% more manganese, 80% more zinc. So when you eat food, you don't just eat stuff. You eat nutrition. And nutrition is disappearing. 80% nutrition is gone in industrial food. But then you add the varieties you're using. You're using toxics, and that's why we have a chronic disease epidemic, which is now just around you check. What's the biggest burden people are carrying? Chronic disease. And the solution comes from the soil, comes from biodiversity. But the same solution that helps us be more healthy is what is the solution for the climate disaster. Everyone's panicking about climate disaster. And the research is now showing, the more you intensify biodiversity, the more you intensify photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is the answer, because the Earth cooled herself from 290 degrees to 13 degrees and reduced the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere from 98% to 0.03% through photosynthesis. It's her technology of growing food, giving us oxygen. Yeah? No machine can do this. No machine can give us oxygen. No machine can give us food. They have these giant machines that are sucking out carbon dioxide at very high energy use. You're mining more material. If you've seen these images of carbon capture machines, it's more energy use, more pollution, more emissions, more. And the research of our community is showing that if we do ecological farming, we can sequester 34.74 gigatons of CO2 per, and this is much more than the emissions burden. 10% farms in 10 years can undo the buildup. 10% farms. And all we need, and so this 1.4 degrees that everyone panics about, that we can't reach it, we can't reach it, we can't reach it. You can if you remember that we are part of nature, that nature is a creative force, that with nature, intensifying not chemicals, but living processes. We get more food with more nutrition. We deal with the climate havoc. We have more biodiversity. And not just that, we actually create what I call Earth democracy again. So for me, in Earth democracy, it's a democracy of all life, without the imposed hierarchies and inequalities, the anthropocentrism that humans are superior, the racism that says whites are superior, the patriarchy that says men are superior, religions that are being made to pitch against each other. In living democracy, in Gaian democracy, all species are equal, all people are equal. The autopoietic self-organizing nature of Gaia is democratic. There are no privileged species, no privileged people in Earth democracy. Thank you.
At the cost of sounding totally overwhelmed, let me tell you, I have heard Professor Dipesh Chakraborty, Professor Parthu Chatterjee on almost straddling the same subjects. And what Dr. Vandana Shiva has given us today is a rocket to understanding the Anthropocene. She hasn't used the name, and that is to her credit. I will open the floor in exactly 2 minutes. I want to thank her for bringing her presence to us. Any of you younger than I am, any of you here who are in your 40s or 50s, you will remember this talk in years to come. We will remember this talk, all of us, in all the years to come. I know I will. This is not a scientist who sits in an ivory tower or in a lab. This is what makes her unique to me. And I do get emotional when I read bits from here and bits from there, from her books. Replay the YouTube interviews with her. And I truly am grateful that you're here. Thank you. That was just brilliant. Now, as I said before, I open up the floor, and we have enough time. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Shiva, when you talked about the land and the seed connection, while you were talking, I was thinking of the Canadian ethos that we've both straddled. The idea in the indigene, whether you're talking Cherokee or Ojibwe, or you're talking about the Mississauga Indians, this is what they always said, that the land and the seed. Although they were not farmers, what farming they learnt from the settler colonists. But they always said, at the end of the day, when you own the seed, you own the land. Would you like to comment on that?
Okay. Yeah. The seed and the soil and the land are so intimately connected. I now say the seed makes the soil and the soil makes the seed. Because, you see, the Green Revolution, what we are not told, the part of the Green Revolution, that agriculture and crops and seeds were always about feeding all creation. So the soil would get the straw, the animals would get the straw, and humans would eat the grain. And there's so many areas in Chhattisgarh and other places where they make these beautiful decorations. First time I went, typical, we think it's all for consumption. I said, so was there a festival? And this woman scolded me. She says, no, this is for the birds when there's no rice in the field. So they will continue to have food. So our tall varieties give food back to the soil. And the seeds, as they grew, give more food to the soil, and each of them had a symbiosis. And new research is showing that as you give more food to the soil, then the soil organisms grow, and the soil organisms then pick up more nutrition and bring it to the plant. And the more the plant gets, the more photosynthesis it can do. You can increase productivity just by taking care of the soil up to fivefold. Fivefold. No chemicals, no genetic engineering can get there. I just want to show you. So this is a study where we did with the top soil ecologist of India, comparing the organic farms and the chemical farms in Bengal Valley. And so there's a tall histogram, and there's either the low ones or negative. The tall is all organic soils. The negative is all chemical. Whether it's soil fungi, bacteria, nitrogen, or take any mineral, we are destroying through the whole system of chemicals and the new seeds adapted to chemicals. We are destroying the soil's capacity to give us food and nutrition.
In fact, I was just thinking, when we first went to Canada from Singapore, I had absolutely no idea about organic farming. And for the first time, we heard that chicken, pork, all the meats, the land that they grazed on had to lie fallow for 7 years before you could say that this manner of creature which you want to eat is organic. Okay, so let's open it up, if you don't mind. We've got, I think, Professor Jean Carol Ewart. Are you still there? No. Viveka, are you there?
Good.
She's there.
She's there. Okay, so Professor Ewart, would you have a question for Dr. Vandana Shiva?
Well, I'd like to apologize on behalf of American agribusiness for having colonized the world. I was so touched and moved by what you said, because this is an area of sustainability and climate change that I really don't know anything about. I mean, it's so huge that I'm not even sure where to start asking. But I really, really appreciated what you said. I'm going to read your materials because I feel so ignorant about this. And I feel like, we're destroying the world, and we don't even know what we're destroying. We don't even know what is of value. So other than I don't have a specific question. I have this huge area that just opened in my head that says you don't know anything about this. So I'm going to start reading.
You know, America was also an agrarian society till not so long ago.
Yes.
And when I was doing the work on agriculture and GATT and WTO, I remember reading an agriculture secretary's statement that you have to squeeze the farmer off the land like you squeeze the toothpaste out of a toothpaste tube. So it's all been deliberate policy, and right now is kind of the end where there is really, the people who think I'm a brain without a body are seriously saying, we will have a future of farming without farmers, food without farms. The drones will do your poison, and the farms will produce raw material for labs and microbes, which will somehow put together something we'll call food, fake meat, fake milk, fake bread. And they're working on this because every element is patented. What happened to seed is now happening to food. You must have heard of something called Impossible Burger, the fake meat. Mm-hmm. It has 14 patents for the ingredients of the fake meat. But if ultra-processed food has already given us this huge disease burden, and it's scientifically established now, that it's destroying the gut metabolism that is leading to all of this, can you imagine if every ingredient of your food is synthetic and it's not being tested? In the fake milk, there's 92 molecules that have never been tested before. 92. Nobody knows what they're going to do. They give it to babies. Nobody knows what new diseases will come up. Poison. And that's why sort of reclaiming the seed and reclaiming food and reclaiming knowledge everywhere, in the United States, in Europe, Africa, Latin America, India, everywhere. It's become the most important imperative, both for the planet as well as people.
Remember Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. A Daniel come to judgment. Yea, a Daniel. Okay, so let's have the first question. Let's have the first question. Ektu mic ta dekhe deben, please. Thank you. Okay, who's asking the first question? Dr. Pradeep Kakkar, please go ahead.
I want to say that listening to your talk, Dr. Shiva, and thinking about all the campaign that we are being subjected to in the current political atmosphere in the country, I feel embarrassed and ashamed that we are being potentially subjected to a kind of leadership which is so completely ignorant of the kinds of issues that you've raised. So my question is, since you did say that you spent 3 years at the IIM Bangalore, if you could be a dictator tomorrow and could lay down a couple of policy prescriptions that the country must do, what would they be?
I believe never even imagine being a dictator. My commitment to Earth's democracy is not only that the tiniest cell in our body and the tiniest microbe in the soil and the smallest plant in the forest are self-organized sentient beings, not only autopoietic, but interbeings. And in this Earth's democracy, there is no center. Every part of life is its own center. And what I would do is remove all the burdens of control. That's what I would do.
Wonderful. Okay, I have 3 Bengal Club book club members. I'll let them, each of them have a question, and then we'll pass it on. Thank you, Pradeep.
Sorry.
Yeah. Make it short.
So what a fascinating talk, and a thing is that the official response to the fact that we need genetically modified food, that we need our seeds to be controlled by 3 companies, that the fact that we need all these corporates, is that the time is going to come when the earth can never governments can never feed all its people. The population growth is going to require these interventions, that companies are doing it, that they ought to, in fact, they should have controlled our lives sooner. So that's one thing, and obviously I don't agree with that. The second thing is, do you think that activists are fighting a lone battle now? Because I used to write about biodiversity issues for my newspaper, which no longer wants these things. We wrote about it for many years, and then they no longer want to hear the same story. That Monsanto now has lost another case in America, or that biodiversity, Harish, you're writing about the same old thing again? Are you milking the story? How much can you milk it? So do you think that activists are fighting without support, that the media no longer is with you, that governments do not understand or will not understand, and that they're completely under the control of corporations?
So, this whole issue of the desperation, the Malthusian desperation, comes from what I've called the monoculture of the mind. You take an abundant earth that can produce everywhere, and then you shrink the area where you'll grow fruit, which has to be the irrigated land, the fertile land. Then you shrink even more the photosynthetic capacity and grow row crops, which means you're wasting all of that space in between and the sunshine. Worse, then you take a plant that feeds the cow, the earthworm, and the human, and you say it'll only feed the human, and let the cow starve and let the earthworm starve. Then you put more fertilizer and empty out the nutrition of that food. So you're basically trading in nutritionally empty global commodities, and they are not feeding people. 90% of the GMO corn and soya, which is the fastest growing acreage in the world, is going for biofuel to drive cars and animal feed. Now, when I go to Dehradun, there's one, we kind of go through the sugarcane belt. They're now paying subsidies to companies to turn rice and sugarcane into fuel for cars. And of course, we did a study, 75% of the corn being grown in this country now, most of it hybrid corn of Monsanto, is for animal feed. So it's no more a food system. So that story that, we can't feed the world. Of course you can't feed the world. If greed guides you, you will starve the world. On the second question of, you see, the GMO story is one element of it. It is what became aggravated because it's the part that was being attempted to be forced through law and intellectual property globally. So it in a way united the world through the arrogance of the corporations. Right now, if you ask me, what are the issues in the food system that no one will be able to ignore? The mainstream media will for a while, and they'll have to come back to it. On climate change, they ignored for a long time that the soil has the solution, I wrote a book called Soil Not Oil. Now they're making films on this because that's the truth. That's where the carbon gets sequestered. So eventually, it'll be the health issue. It'll be the health issue where you can, because real people suffer real problems which have real costs. And more experts who really know their field in health. I personally know 3 doctors, cancer specialists, who have left their clinics after the big detailed studies. One is in Hawaii, one is in Italy, one is in New York. They've left their clinics and started organic farms. This is, if I've got to solve metabolic disease problems, I've got to begin with the food. So that's where we have to move. Rather than jumping silo to silo, we have to do earth democracy politics, which is interconnect the issues that are connected. the health of the soil, the issue of climate, and the health of people. And the science is there. There's so much science.
Thank you so much. Okay, one more from the floor. Yes, please. Can you pass on the mic?
Just now, my question relates to that. I believe that about 60 to 70% of the world's land which is farmed or farmland is for animal feed. Is that correct, roughly? India not so much, but the rest of the world?
Those figures are very mixed up because they are calculating in those figures not just things like GM soya grown in the Amazon, which is so wrong, but the fact that the area is too dry to grow agricultural crops. And pastoralists have to take care of it. So all of Mongolia is pastoralist. All of the Sahara is pastoralist. Rajasthan is pastoralist. So they mix up. One of the things that's gone wrong with science, especially in this phase, is to equate unequal things. To equate GMOs with organic. To equate pastoralism with factory farming. Now, factory farming is intensive feed, intensive water, intensive pollution. Pastoralism is the only way to regenerate soils that have very low moisture because it distributes. Through the animals, you distribute the pressure. Whereas in agriculture, you localize the cultivation. And this new word that has been created called animal agriculture is nonsense. There's nothing like animal agriculture. There's factory farming, putting animals in prisons. There is animals on farms, which is called integrated farming, and Albert Howard said no ecosystem lives without animals. Every ecosystem has trees, herbs, small crops, and animals. Every ecosystem. Integrated farming, to close the cycle, the straw is eaten by the animals, and the waste of the animals becomes the fertility of the soils. That's how the cycles of renewal carry on. Factory farms are different, they're linear systems. And by creating this language of animal agriculture, there is very distorted understanding. So that 75% is a mix-up.
Okay, but just to add up the amount of land which is being used for factory farming of animals and the amount of land which is being used to feed them, what percentage of farmland would you say that is?
Well, I will say that 7 times the acreage outside Western countries like the United States or Europe, where there is factory farming, is used in other countries to grow the animal feed.
Because my question, just getting away for a moment from the genetic element and the chemical elements of your talk, but coming to this reforestation and biodiversity element. And I don't ask this as a facetious question. I'm a robust non-vegetarian myself. Would it help if we all became vegetarians?
No, if you became vegetarian and you still ate Roundup ready GMO soya in your milk, in your bread, you would still be destroying the world. Because Roundup...
but the right kind of vegetarian food, okay?
The right kind of vegetarian means biodiversity.
Yes. So
and it means...
excluding animals from food.
It means feeding your gut. And the gut doesn't like fake food. And a lot of the new food is someone took me to a vegan shop once. Everything was processed. I couldn't see a plant. Plant-based, you can't see a plant. Squash this and squash that and mix with this and mix with that. I think that's the problem. We disguise food so badly we don't know. We have to know what we are eating. Because we are what we eat. So better eat with knowledge.
Thank you so much. Anyone on the floor? Anyone here? No? Sure. Professor Kaveri.
Thank you, Professor, for this, as CS said, a riveting talk. Mine is, you spoke about Earth democracy and said it's going to be a kind of, everybody's at the center, right? So, with ecofeminism, so where will ecofeminism feature on that? If everybody's equal, then would we have any place for feminism to play a role?
Of course, what is feminism? Saying we're equal. And
Yes.
therefore, we cannot be your periphery.
Okay.
You are the center, we are not your periphery. Everyone's the center. The same principles apply for earth democracy, which is all species, all people, and ecofeminism, which addresses the issues of capitalist patriarchy and what discriminations it has created. That women don't work, women don't have knowledge. You know, Bacon wrote a book, and Bacon's philosophy is the basis of the Royal Society of England, which is the pinnacle of science. He wrote a book called The Masculine Birth of Time. You know? So, of course, very clearly, the mechanistic philosophy was an attack on women and nature, both. He saw people with diversity of knowledge as witches. You know?
That's where the criticism comes of, Arthur Miller doing the Crucible. That's what he wanted to show. And the idea was rooted in Bacon.
Thank you.
Yes, of course, it would be a pleasure.
Thank you for absolutely a brilliant talk. Fascinated me because being a physicist, a mathematician, you've gone into an area that is absolutely unimaginable. But my little question is, everybody's talking about organic. Whatever item you go to buy in the market says very in bold letters organic. Are they really organic, or are they infused with chemicals and fooling us?
So, the word organic means the science of living systems. People have forgotten that. Now, I gave a talk, Agriculture Minister and me gave a talk on organic. And after my talk, this publisher comes up to me and says, I did not know till today that there was anything scientific about organic. I thought it was about brands for selling. That's it. So he said, will you write a book? So I did a book for him, which he uses for agriculture universities. When, there's an organic where you are committed to do the right thing for the earth, you're committed to growing food in ways that doesn't harm, you're committed to growing food that's healthy for people. When you do it with that, that's organic. But for many people, selling a product that's premium with a little margin is the more important thing. And for that, there are very many shortcuts because certification agencies themselves cut costs. And during COVID, I had to have a big, they destroyed a Prevention of Food Adulteration Act and created this FSSAI. And the FSSAI keep changing laws every few months. They've allowed plastic in flour. Instead of fiber, you can put plastic. 30% blending with any oil in any refined oil. 30% unknown oils. So they keep doing, these little slippages they keep making. And I had worked on the standards, and I had said the small farmers should not be burdened with costly certification. So if I'm growing organic and I sell it to you directly, that should not need certification because you know me and we buy. So that's section 4 of the Act. During COVID, when everything was locked down, FSSAI changes 4 with an additional section that aggregators will also be excluded. Now, what's an aggregator? Aggregator is a company that goes to one chemical farm, maybe one organic farm, just aggregates. And now, by getting the protection of section 4, it doesn't have to certify. It can just declare. But the farmer selling to you, you know him and he knows you. Aggregator, nobody knows anyone. So when you get into that level, that's not where trust will be born. And that's why you will have to build linkages to real farmers. Real people, real farmers. And it takes effort. But the point is, once that relationship is established, it's there forever. I would love to do something, because we built up a strong organic movement of small farmers, because of your zamindari problem. By the end of it, when Operation Barga happened, it's very tiny farms. You know, farms are small, but they have enough. And bit by bit, it can get added up. But I would love to, you know, and all it needs is a delivery system once. Like we do deliveries from around Delhi, from the organic farmers to Delhi. I think twice a week, organic vegetables are brought and just delivered to the homes. Those arrangements should be made, can be made. But both the farmers and the eaters, I don't call them consumers, because the word consumption was what? You know what? In the Middle Ages, the word for tuberculosis.
Yes.
Consumption, you died of consumption.
Till before penicillin.
Yeah. So I'd say eaters. They're growers and eaters.
Lovely. Okay, we've got Anju Munshi and we've got Anasuya Paul, and I think it's been just such rich and impactful sessions. Please,
Dr. Shiva, I have no words to tell you how explosive a session it was on different levels, education, awareness, and information, and thank you so much. And I especially like the phrases, you know, that I'm going to go back home with, like earth democracy, nature's intelligence, and feminism of the earth, you know. I mean, these are some fabulous phrases which have actually, you know, built up a kind of a connectedness with Mother Earth. So my question to you is going to go beyond the green grass and the healthy forests. It's going to be talking about the time when you were growing up and when to reach the place that you're in right now. In one of the interviews which I watched of yours, you did say that there were two things that your parents passed on to you. One was lack of fear, extreme fearlessness, and also to lead a kind of a disciplined life, but also a life which allowed you the freedom to make your choices and to learn by your mistakes. Now, this is, I think, one kind of a parenting module which we need in the world of today, because today's system, the time and the times that we are going through ensures, allow me to use this word, chipko parenting, you know, because it is too much of protection, too much of, like thinking for the children, working for them, doing everything for them, as a result of which we don't allow them to grow, you know, and blossom and think for themselves. So I think, to me, that appeared to be a beautiful way to, blossom into an individual who can exercise his thoughts and his plan of action, the way he thinks. And would you like to comment on this Chipko parenting of the day, which is not as noble as the Chipko movement? Thank you.
So you're meaning Chipko as overprotection, right?
Yeah, it's like clinging on, you know.
But you know, that comes from possessiveness. And it comes from actually, no matter how much you think you are doing good, it comes from treating a child not as a living being, but a child as an object, as a possession and as an object, you know? And all these, you know, part of it is because there's so much to sell, we also get trapped with these subtle messages. And that's why, for me, you know, the freedom that our parents gave us was first the freedom of fearlessness, to know there is no power bigger than your conscience. It gives you so much freedom. Yeah, aake Musalman aayenge, jayenge. You know, live with your conscience. And the second is the freedom of simplicity. Knowing that enough is enough. Because otherwise, nothing is enough. You know? So, of course, I mean, I would say, instead of, we need to, maybe some of you who work a lot on parenting, parenting as earth democracy, that the child is an autonomous being, you are an autonomous being. What's the conversation between two independent beings that give fulfillment to both?
Excellent. Thank you. Anasuya?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shukla. It's, Shiva, it has been so, it's been really nice to listen to you. So actually, from all that you were saying, what
bothered me most was the fact that there is a break of trust of governments towards their people, allowing for something so insidious to come into our lives. And from one of your YouTube videos, we've seen the kind of danger Bill Gates poses to the world. And we are sitting here listening to you, we are knowledgeable, but if I go out to talk about this to any lay friend of mine, I am branded as a conspiracy theorist. There are very few people who will give me the time of day. So this is important information. This needs to be communicated very with an urgent basis. So what would you have to say about how we take it forward? Because our children, like Anju said, need to know about our democracy.
Well, I think because there's so much diversity involved, I think we should bring every element of this diversity. For me, the sciences of living systems, which is what J.C. Bose was talking about, which is what the people who are looking at, living systems in their fullness, that set of sciences, that knowledge, is a democracy. It's epistemic democracy. Producing in ways that the needs of all are met. And the artificial scarcity created by pitting people against each other, it's divide and rule. And when you were talking, I wrote Earth Democracy when we shut down WTO. But people would come to me, journalists would come and say, well, we know what you're against, but we don't know what you're for. I said, we've told you what we are for. We are not for patenting of seed because we are for the freedom of the seed. We are not for privatization of water because we believe water is a commons and is needed by all beings. So I said, okay, I'll put it down because they don't seem to understand that the foundation of our no is a yes to the world we want and that we are creating. And I wrote 3 chapters. The first was, of course, that the economies that are being built are economies of death. Both because it's killing so many people, as well as it's putting death at the center, instruments of killing. It's a necro economy. And so we need to create living economies, but that means a shift from instruments of power and domination to instruments of collaboration. We call them now circular economies. On the democracy issue, it was becoming very clear that, as long as things were working, we treated representative democracy as workable. The trust that's been broken is in representative democracy. It was broken first by the fact that corporations took over the governance, and instead of being of the people, by the people, for the people, it became of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations. But because within a decade or 2 of that kind of globalization, people started to rebel. People were running out of water. Bolivia, they privatized the water. And then they said even the rooftop water harvesting is illegal because all water belongs to us. So people started to rebel. So then they brought 2 strategies. First strategy was militarization. That's why we have a militarized corporate state. I remember the particular days when we had passed the PESA Act, the 2006 Act, which gave full rights to tribals to make their decisions. And globalization, I think in 96, 95 globalization started, 96 steel plants would come, villagers would sit 3 days, 4 days, decide. I said, no, we don't want. We'll have money, but we'll lose our forests. The ancestors are usually stones in the village. We'll lose our ancestors, our children won't know who they are. And it's reflect and sing and dance and say, no, we don't want it. And they used PESA to the fullest. So for 3 years, they kept saying no to coal mines, steel plants, especially in Chhattisgarh. And then Sarvajudam was cooked up, which was divide and rule. Tribals themselves were paid to fight tribals. So the divide and rule started. And laws that had been put in place started to get undone. But the divide and rule is now at its peak. Now Now, that kind of corporate invasion will only take place with divide and rule. So that's why, again, why is earth democracy important? Because not only are you reclaiming your participation in the earth without arrogance, yeah? You're shedding the arrogance and you're creating a participation of humility and love and, yeah. And the second thing is you are rebuilding your economy. A farming that produces good food, gives livelihood to people. And third, for me, the power of our democracy is, if we are part of one earth in our diversity, and we are part of one earth family, then divide and rule is an irrelevant strategy. So it becomes the antidote. It becomes the immunity building. It becomes immunity building. It has to come from within us.
But don't you think we need to take control of the narrative to be heard?
That's how you take control of the narrative. You tell your own stories through the way you live, because there's no point telling stories and being trapped in life. You know, both have to go together.
You're reminding, sorry to cut in, but you just lit a spark in me. Michael Ondaatje, the Sri Lankan Canadian multi-Booker Prize winner, says one thing. He says, we don't want to hear one voice anymore. We want to hear many voices. And all the African writers today are saying exactly what you're saying.
And before we wrap up, I will leave the books here, because I can always get you more, for your book club. This is my book, Staying Alive, which is first. This is my 35 years of work on biodiversity, patent law, all the biopiracy cases, all the GMO cases are in this. And then the 3 reports. This is Seeds of Hope, Seeds of Resilience, which is both all the research on organic, but also all our work on distributing seeds of resilience after the super cyclone, after the tsunami, all the salt-tolerant, flood-tolerant rices. That's in here. And 2 reports I got specially for you, Julie. One is colonialism, globalization, and the roots of the ecological emergency. And we begin with 42, Te bhaga, Jaan devo, dhan devo na. Yeah, very powerful. And this one, they consolidated my writings of women, nature, and agriculture, the eco-feminist reader. So I'll leave this with you. Thank you. And there is the announcement of the trek and the summer school.
Shebunti, will you take charge of all this that Dr. Vandana Shiva has left for us? And I believe you have a few words to say as vote of thanks.
And for this, if they want to get in touch with Shukla, yes, she will send the details. Shukla, why don't you just give your email or phone or whatever system?
Give it to me. I have it. I can pass it on to Shiva. Yeah. After you, I'm done. Thank you so much, everyone. The fact that you're here is the greatest compliment. And it's, I think, just hitting 8 o'clock. So,
good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Library Subcommittee of Bengal Club, my deepest gratitude to Dr. Shiva for such an illuminating session. The session has not only been informative, but the information that she has shared with all of us, at times it has seemed to be quite scary, and there has been a note of warning as well. And thanks galore to Professor Dr. Julie Banerjee Mehta for all her endeavor in making this event happen. Thank you to all of you for attending this event. Thanks, good night.
Thank you.
just brilliant.
So she'll take.
She won't even. Just one. Oh, so good to meet you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Wait, there's a